and welcome to What It Takes to Be Heard at Work. So this is our first ever summer What It Takes alumni speaker event this year, which is specifically aimed at alumni graduating in 2021 or earlier. The established award-winning series is usually targeted at current Westminster students and recent graduates during term time, but we're really excited to deliver this event for alumni who may be at more advanced stages in their career journeys. So let me introduce myself. My name is Jenny Garrett OBE and I'm one of the careers consultants here at the University of Westminster. And I'm absolutely delighted to be hosting today. So before I introduce our fantastic speaker, just a few housekeeping things to consider. So this talk is being recorded and it will be edited and made available on our YouTube channel when it's ready. We'll send you the link. Your cameras and microphones are automatically turned off. The live general group chat is on. Please use the chat to ask Jenny questions. Colleagues moderating the event will collate your questions throughout this talk, and I'll put these to Jenny at the end of her presentation. So I'd like to really kindly introduce our fantastic speaker. So our alumni speaker for today's talk is Jenny Garrett, who will share her top tips on how to be heard at work. Jenny graduated from the University of Westminster in 2000 with a BA in Business Administration. She's now an award-winning career coach and leadership trainer with nearly 2 decades of experience of running a global business. During this talk, Jenny will discuss the essential mental and physical preparation needed to speak up effectively in any organisational setting. She will also share some practical tips and strategies you can implement at work. So I'm now going to pass you over to Jenny, and then I'll pop back in after for the Q&A. So please do remember to put any questions you have in the chat throughout Jenny's presentation. So with that, it's over to Jenny.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I really appreciate it, Janet. And it's great to be here.
Thank you so much.
No
Can't
problem.
wait.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. It's one of my highlights when I get to speak for the University of Westminster. Fantastic. I can definitely tell you that when I was graduating all those years ago, I didn't expect to be back in this kind of shape or form. So it's
we are very grateful, Jenny. Totally grateful.
Thank you. Thank you. And great to be here. Great to see everyone. Although I can't physically see you, I'm imagining what you all look like, and really happy to be here to talk about what it takes to be heard at work. So I'm going to share, as Janet said, some practical tips with you. And I'm going to expect some interaction, even if it is via the chat or via some polls that I have. So I really do appreciate a bit of interaction. So please do join in. My career was discussed there really beautifully, but I'll just add a couple of things to it. That I've written a couple of books, one called Rocking Your Role, A Guide to Success for Female Breadwinners, and another one called Equality versus Equity, Tackling Issues of Race in the Workplace, which I'm very proud to have written and hope they've made a difference in many people's lives. I have a social enterprise called Rocking Your Teens, which I created 10 years ago now, along with some colleagues, which aims to inspire young people and help them increase their aspirations. And I also have something called the Diverse Executive Coach Directory, which aims to really connect corporates with a diverse variety of coaches rather than perhaps a homogenous group that they have engaged with before. And I'm also a non-executive director, or a trustee actually, of a charity called Up Projects, which commissions art. For example, the Windrush statue that's in Waterloo Station. If any of you are based in London, you may have come across it. They were responsible for the commissioning of that work, and they do some other amazing work. So I've got a very diverse group of activities that I do, as well as running a leadership consultancy. But being heard is all part of it, because at the heart of all of my work, I feel, is empowerment and creating environments where everyone can thrive. And to do that, I've had to speak up and be heard in many different settings, whether it's been things like TED Talks that I've created, whether it's been on the news, which I have been many times, or perhaps in other settings like today, where I'm speaking. I've had to find my voice, think about the right way to communicate what I want to say so that it lands and so that it's heard. And I want to share that this hasn't necessarily been an easy journey for me. I think when people see people who speak a lot like myself, you just think, oh, you probably were born like that. You probably were the person who was always speaking, always up at the front of the room from an early age. I wasn't that person necessarily. I always had very big dreams and ambitions to change the world in some way, to make the world a better place. I recall saying, when I'm Prime Minister, I'm going to do these things. So I had ambitions to make change happen, but I didn't necessarily have a loud voice or a voice in many spaces. And I started developing my voice, I think, when I started coaching. I realized that the one-to-one conversations that I was having with my clients were really important, but actually what was coming out of that should be shared more broadly. And I wasn't sure how to do that. I started developing training programs in leadership and coaching. I started finding my voice that way. But I must say, when I think I found my boldest voice was when I wrote my first book. And I knew people were going to ask me about it in many different settings. And I thought, I really need to find this voice. I really need to think about what my authentic voice is and how I can communicate in the best way possible. And that really is about, I think it's probably about 13 years ago now, I wrote my first book. So if you haven't at this point found your voice or feel that you are heard, all is not lost because it's an ongoing journey. It's something that you can develop. It's a muscle. It's not something that you're either born with or you don't have it. And there might be many barriers to speaking up. You might be fearful of losing your job, or you might think it's not something that I culturally do, or my personality preference holds me back, or whatever. But whatever the barrier might be in place currently, I believe you can overcome it if you really want to. So I just wanted to share my own experience, just to tell you that I continue to be a work in progress, and I have been a work in progress to get to the point I am at now. So, what are we going to cover today? Well, we're going to think about the mental and physical preparation that might be needed to be heard, the right approach for you to speaking up in your organization, or perhaps like me, you're on a trustee board or a non-executive board. What's the best way to speak up? I'm going to share some voice tips and some practical actions that you can try back in the workplace. And I do love to hear it when you try something and it works. I mean, I most hope that it works. But even if you have a challenge, I'd like to hear from you. So please do keep in touch with me after today. I'm on LinkedIn. You can Google me in different places, because I love to hear your stories of success. It helps me think about what I do and the way I do it to ensure that it lands with you. So let's see if this is working for you. Can you see a QR code come up? If you can't, let me know and I'll change my view. Okay. No. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing and then I'm going to reshare. Give me a second. But while I'm sharing, you can be counting up the amount of years that you have working in a professional setting, because it just helps me to understand where you are at. So give me a second. Just have to share in a different way so that you are able to see. Okay, I'm hoping this time you can see a poll. And what you have to do is either go to slido.com and type in this hashtag, or you can use the barcode, whichever works for you. How many years of professional work experience do you have? So I'm not thinking about the paper round you had, if that still exists when you were 13. It's sort of right now, how many years do you have sort of real professional working life? Gosh, quite experienced actually. Yeah, very experienced. Thank you. Just give it a moment. See how many we get. So 43% of you, or 40-ish% of you, have 8 to 15 years experience. So lots of working life experience. And then 22% for more than 25 years, and also 16 to 25 years. So quite a diverse group. Only 10% of you have 3 to 7 years. And I think that fits very much with what I was just saying. The fact that we are all a work in progress. There's always something new to learn, and there's always more to learn, no matter how much experience you've had. So my second question to you is, what best describes your current professional level? So are you entry level, mid level? Are you a director, team leader, manager, executive board level, or are you a business owner? Be great to know. I'll give you a few more seconds to complete it. Great. So over half of you are mid-level and experienced professionals. Then we have some managers and senior managers, some directors, some entry level, and a few business owners like myself. Great, great. Thank you again for sharing. Just so I can know where the majority of you are at. A lot of you have had quite a lot of work experience. You're in mid-level or higher, and we've got a sprinkling right at the beginning. So I wanted to start with thinking about where we most have conversations, where we most struggle to be heard. And quite often it's in a meeting setting. It's usually one of the most difficult places to be heard. And there are a number of reasons for that. There are lots of people wanting to share their ideas. They come together to get the job done. Not everyone's ideas can be taken up, unfortunately. There are different styles, how the different styles interact with each other can be challenging. And also, not every idea is equal, is it? Some ideas are right up there and they're super ideas. Some are not that great. But also, people usually use a meeting setting to get some credit, to speak up in front of the big boss, whoever that might be, and show that they've got some great contributions that make a difference. So it's a kind of pressure cooker microcosm of the workplace. It's like the whole workplace squeezed into this hour meeting, and it causes a bit of a challenge really for us. It can really be hard to get your voice heard in those settings, especially if you're someone who is a bit more reflective. Some people speak to think, and other people think before they speak. And that can make a difference, because if you're thinking before you speak, sometimes someone's sharing your idea while you're still thinking about it. Or perhaps someone's taking a lot of the space in the meeting, so you don't feel that you can get into it. So these are all really challenging situations that happen for us. And whether you're starting out, or whether you've been in an organization or working for a long time, these challenges still exist. Every voice shapes the outcome. Every voice makes a difference. And sometimes if you haven't been able to speak, you can worry that actually what you've said, what you've got to say hasn't been taken into account, or people might think you have nothing to say, which is even more dangerous when we're thinking about progressing our idea. Because quite often people will go to the people who speak a lot. I think there is in our society a little bit of a bias towards extroversion. And as a result, sometimes if you're not the person who speaks the most, people might think you have nothing to say, or you're not interested, or perhaps you're very happy where you are and you're not so interested in progression. Now, no matter who you are, it can happen that you are not heard. You may have seen this on the news. It wasn't that long ago. It was in 2024. Diane Abbott, the MP, tried 40 times. Oh, Mr. Speaker, I've got something to say. And she was ignored. And it can be a real challenge. You might be, gesturing to say you've got something to say. You might put your hand up, but you might be overlooked. And someone who speaks on Prime Minister questions, no matter what you think of Diane Abbott or her political leaning, should be able to get her voice in. And I think it shows you how big the challenge is when someone like her is being ignored, who should be heard in that setting by the speaker. So if you're experiencing that, you think you're not heard in meetings, you think you're being overlooked in some way, you find it difficult to be heard, please know you are not alone. But we are going to think about how we can overcome it. So I want to ask you, what are your challenges when it comes to being heard at work? What is the biggest challenge for you? Is it confidence or nerves when speaking up? Is it the organizational culture? Do you feel that it's not inclusive, that some voices are ignored? Perhaps people with certain accents or different ways of communicating, perhaps they're neurodivergent, or perhaps different ethnicities or gender, for example, are not heard in the way that they should be. Is it you're going through them? Yes, you're updating. It's harder for me to talk through because they're all moving up and down. Is it that you're not sure how to speak up or how to get credit? So you want some strategies about that. And is it, or perhaps navigating different communication styles that you find difficult? So you're completing it as we speak, which is great. So navigating different communication styles is coming up quite high, such as neurodiversity or introversion. Knowing how to speak up to get credit is coming up quite high as well. Then we have worrying about your own identity, how your identity is being perceived, accent, background, gender, ethnicity. Great. Okay. I say great, but it's good to know where we are. So organizational culture is coming quite low, which is good. Sounds like you're working in some inclusive environments that are not stopping you being heard, but some of the other things are coming up. So we're going to look at each of these. And actually, what I also wanted to say is if there's anything that I haven't included that you think, well, actually, it's none of these things that are stopping me being heard, there's something else, please type it in the chat, because that would be really helpful for me to know as well. So yeah, if there's an other, please let me know what it is, and I will come back to that as well. Or maybe it's something we might deal with in the questions as well. So I'm going to start with thinking about confidence, which 20% of you said was a bit of an issue. I'm going to see if I can see the chat. No, I can't. I would love to have done a screen grab. I'm going to do just a quick photo of this so that I can come back to the percentages we have later on. Okay. So 20% of you said confidence is a bit of a challenge. It could be confidence about speaking up, or it could be that nerves are a barrier. They're interconnected, but also a little bit different. So I'm just going to talk to you about some of the things you can do about that and some of the things that I have had to overcome myself. So I've had dry mouth before. I've forgotten what I've had to say. What is it that I want to say? Because of a bit of stage fright or fright in the moment. That's happened to me before. I've also had the sort of nerves where you get a bit shaky and your knees shake a little bit as well. So those are experiences I've had when I've had nerves, and some of those might be familiar to you. So I think about it in two ways, sort of physical and mental preparation that we need to do when we're thinking about speaking in a meeting setting or any other setting, really, where we're having a bit of nerves. First of all, you really need to do your homework. If a meeting's thrown into your diary and you have to rock up with 5 minutes notice, you're probably not going to feel as confident as if you've done a bit of your research in advance and thought about who the audience is you're going to speak to, what you're going to speak about. So preparation is really important. Who is my audience? What might they say? What is it I want to say? What might come up in this meeting so that I feel confident? And you can ask people about this. You can gather opinions. You can do your own research. We have AI now. You could say this meeting is about this. This is my topic area. What questions might be asked of me? So you can start to really get yourself in a really prepared state. So at the bare minimum, I think you should be doing that because that's going to help you. And I've said this, understanding your audience. Who are you speaking to? What matters to them? I, at the start of this talk, have asked who my audience is. How long have you been working? What level are you at? What are your challenges? I'm getting to know you so that I can make sure that when I'm speaking to you, it's something that matters to you and it lands for you in the situation that you are in. So think about who you're speaking to. How might you have to tailor what you're talking about, the language you use, in order for it to land with them? Prepare for questions. Yeah, this is really important. You could ask the audience questions if you're not sure where they stand and you haven't been able to find out about them. And you can also prepare for their questions. What questions do you have? Having that two-way interaction is really helpful. So engage with people. Don't just sit and wait for your turn to speak, add your point. Maybe you might want to ask a question, especially if perhaps you might not have something huge to talk about on the topic. Asking everyone a question could be really helpful. What do we think about this point that's been made? What do we think about where we are in terms of our stages working on this project? So questions can be powerful. They facilitate interaction, but they also mean you get your voice in the room. And if you find it difficult to have a perspective on something or don't quite have a perspective on it, asking a question is a really good thing to do. It's not a sign of weakness. I think sometimes people don't ask questions because they think everyone else knows, so I shouldn't ask any questions. I don't think that's true. Often the question that you ask is the one everyone else is wondering, but also asking the right questions gets everyone thinking. And know what you know. One of the things that I think we often find is that someone is an expert in the room and doesn't speak up on their topic. There's a lot of people speaking up about a topic and they don't know anything. So it's not a bad thing to say, in my experience, I think this. Or, yeah, from what I've done and what I know in my area of expertise, this would be the thinking around that. This is not arrogance. It's about acknowledging your value. You never want to walk out of a room where you are the expert in the topic and not talked about your expertise. It's the perfect opportunity to do so. So remember, what is it that I know? Well, maybe I'm the numbers person. Maybe I'm the connections person. Maybe I'm an expert in people skills, and they're thinking about initiating a project and not talking to the people. And we know that's going to be a disaster. Speak up. So don't be afraid to speak up. And actually, it's so often when you look at the research about when organizations are not doing well or they're going under, there's so many people who said, I knew, but I didn't speak. I didn't say anything. Don't be that person. If something you say is in service of supporting your team, your organization, the people that you serve, or the product that you create, you owe it really to them and your career to speak up. So what about mental preparation? Well, I like to talk about the A, B, C, D, E. And that's sometimes what's happening is we are telling ourselves we're not good at something. We're not articulate, or people won't hear our idea, or they won't think it's valuable. Think about, where does that come from? Where does that voice in your head, that gremlin that sits on your shoulder and tells you not to speak up, come from? Often there's an activating event, that's the A, and then there's some behavior that comes from that activating event and a consequence. So say I was at school and I put my hand up, and the teacher asked a question and I gave an answer, and then everyone laughed because it wasn't the right answer and I had the wrong end of the stick. So that was the behavior that came from it. The consequence could be that for the rest of the term, and maybe for the rest of my school life, I decided I'm not putting my hand up anymore, because the consequences are that I will be laughed at. Yeah. And what I decided was, I don't have something good to contribute because people laugh at what I have to say. So what we have to do is then move into the D. We have to dispute it. We have to think about all the times we speak and people don't laugh and people value what we have to contribute. And then E, we have to have a new experience of it. We have to have a new story about ourselves, which is actually, I can speak in many settings and people value what I have to say. And as a result, I'm changing my experience and I'm changing my story. Okay, so we have to transform our limiting beliefs into empowering thoughts. Yeah, think about, why is it that I don't speak up? The activating event. Think about the behavior that happened when that activating event happened. Think about the consequences. You've decided now there's a story in your head you don't do something. Dispute it. Think about all the times that story in your head is incorrect and create a new experience. So you might have to do some work on yourself around this and really start to dispute the story you've been telling and create new stories for yourself. The other thing is breathing really helps. And I'm going to share more about this on the next slide. But grounding yourself, being calm, finding ways to center your focus, finding ways to be mindful so you can control those nerves through breathing and through something called PQ reps. I will share with you your positive quotient, how you can positively control your mind. Also manage your energy. We If you get nervous, quite often you get this build-up of energy inside you. And that's why your hands might start shaking, or your knees might be knocking, or even your voice might start quivering. Something I've been known to do before a sort of a high stakes meeting or event is I go to the toilet and I jump up and down and try and get rid of that energy. But another thing that you can do is just be tapping yourself. Tap every area of your body to try and disperse that energy. And it might also be that if you're able to stand up and speak, that you walk around, so you move your body. Again, it stops that energy getting stuck and turning into the shakes and turning into the voice quivering or the hands shaking. So actually finding ways to move your body to get rid of that buildup of energy. And you might be familiar with the power pose. It's this idea of standing like a superhero, hands on hips, legs hip width apart, and doing this superhero stance. It actually has been, there's a TED talk by someone called Amy Cuddy who shares that it actually has been shown to change your physiology and make you feel more confident. So doing that just for 30 seconds before you go into a meeting can make all of the difference. But I mentioned intentional breathing and I mentioned PQ reps. So intentional breathing, what I do is I hold my breath. So I breathe in for 5, hold my breath for 5, and I release for 5. So let's do that together. Breathe in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold for 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. And breathe out slowly for 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now you can do that anywhere. You can be in the meeting and you can do that breathing. No one will know you're doing it and you'll be calming yourself down. But the other thing is these PQ reps. So last year I had the privilege of attending some powerful positive intelligence program that was led by Dr. Shazad Shameen. And he has a book called Positive Intelligence, which I would encourage you to read, especially if you want to be more mindful, more calm, and be in the moment and be able to relax. And he talks about something called PQ reps, short, simple exercises designed to interrupt any negative thought patterns we have and strengthen our inner wisdom. So weaken that voice on your shoulder which says they're going to laugh or they're not interested or they're going to talk over me or I don't have anything to contribute, and strengthen that you've got something to contribute, you've got something to offer, you are wise, you've got expertise, your voice matters in the room. So it will weaken that negative voice and strengthen that wise voice. And PQ reps are what they're called. Now, there are a variety of them, but one that I particularly like, and again, it's something you can do and no one knows you're doing it. Gently rub your index finger and your thumb together. Focus all of your attention on that sensation. Feel those lines in your finger. You know, if you were getting a fingerprint done, you'd feel those, feel them. And you just do this for 10 to 20 seconds whenever you feel stressed or overwhelmed, or simply just need a mental reset. That can have a really profound impact on your mental state, reduce the stress, reduce the anxiety, help you be more in the moment and more self-aware. And as I said, boost that sage, that wisdom muscle, which reminds you how great you are. Okay, so 2 things, breathing, and the second thing, PQ reps, can really help with those nerves, as well as all of the other things I've described about managing your energy and disputing those limiting beliefs you have. You have to be brave ultimately to move beyond where you are, to be more confident and to manage those nerves. And I love this quote by Nelson Mandela. I've learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. So take the fear with you and do it anyway. Don't let that fear hold you back. Too often we wait to be confident. We wait to not have nerves. Actually, you've got to do it to overcome those nerves. So a quick question. What will you try to manage nerves and boost your confidence? Write a sentence, a word here, just to let me know what you'll try. Posture and breathing, lovely. PQ technique, great. Power pose, love it. Remember to breathe. Yes, we can forget. Can you believe it? As human beings, we need to breathe to live. Try to be normal. Yes. Love it. Great. Positive word affirmation. Really nice. Yeah. Think in a good experience of being on the beach. Nice. Yeah, that's really good. Just get yourself into that calm, Zen space. Lovely. Lovely, lovely, lovely. Great. So we've got some ideas of how to manage the nerves. And I know it was only 20% of you who needed that, but I'm hoping those who feel confident still got a new technique to help them. So we'll briefly talk about when organizational culture is a barrier, because actually many of you said it wasn't. However, I'll combine that as well with this idea of worrying that perhaps your identity won't land in the way that you would hope it would. There are many different things we need to think about to navigate our organizational culture. And I think getting an ally can be really helpful. There are different types of allies. There are peers who will stand up for you. So in the meeting setting, if you're being spoken over or you make a point and people ignore it, you could have someone who says, oh, that was a great point Steve made. Actually, can we hear a little bit more about it? So your ally will make sure that people listen. There was something in the Barack Obama administration where women felt that they weren't necessarily being heard. And so the women decided to be allies to each other. And they would, if any woman made a point, they'd say, oh, can we hear more about that? I'd love to hear more about what Aisha said. And sort of make sure that people's points were credited to them and they were also heard. So building allies can be great. It can be with peers, so colleagues on your level. It can also be with senior leaders. I mean, it's great if someone will advocate for you who is a senior leader, who you get to know and who's on your side and thinks of you and asks for your opinion and includes you. So that's a second kind of ally you can get. So someone who's your peer, someone who's really senior but advocates for you. And that's really important, particularly if you are from a minoritized group, whatever that might be, from the LGBTQ plus community. Perhaps you're a very young person in your organization without so many young people. Perhaps you're someone who's introverted in a space of extroverts. Perhaps it's your ethnic diversity, your religious background. Getting someone senior to advocate for you can be a real game changer in your career, and can really help you be heard, because if that person is on your side, other people will listen. So think about the kind of ally or advocate that you could have that could help you be heard. Absolutely, in the ideal world would all be heard and we wouldn't need allies and advocates, but we're not always in that world. So think about that. I think you need to also observe and adapt your approach. So sometimes you might have an idea and it might seem so left field, people don't pick up on it. But think about what is important to your organization, or think about what's important to the leader in the room and connect your idea with what they want to do. If you know you have a leader who cares so much about something, so perhaps they care a lot about efficiencies, that's something that they're always talking about. If you can connect your idea to efficiencies, then you're much more likely to be heard. So it's not just about having ideas and thoughts, it's about connecting them with the organization's goals. And you might have to observe how other people do it. What do other people do that you can pick up on while still being authentically you? So that's really important. The other thing is sometimes we're not heard because we come with the problems. That's not going to work. We tried that 5 years ago. It didn't work then. It's not going to work now. Or let me tell you about all the reasons why this isn't currently doing very well. People don't want to hear lots of problems. It, saps their energy and it doesn't make them feel good. So coming to them with solutions, yeah, that didn't work last time. To make it work this time, we'd have to do these 3 things differently. That's not currently working, but I've been thinking, if we try this, I think it could make a big difference. And I've spoken to a few people and they think so too. Yeah. So coming with solutions enables you to be heard. It's so much more positive. Even if those solutions are not the right solutions, it shows that you've got this can-do attitude, you're open, and you're positive. Whereas coming just with problems can feel a bit negative as well. Um, I think that sometimes to give what you've said more weight, you might also want to write it down. Particularly to ensure your ideas are credited. So you might say it in the meeting, but you might think, oh, someone might run off with that idea, or I'm not sure it landed. There's nothing wrong with following up with a quick email saying, I shared this idea in the meeting, seemed like there was some interest, there might be some traction on that idea. I'm really happy to think about how we take it forward in some way, or bring a working group together on it, or what do you think next stages are? So actually following it up in writing can really help you make sure that you get the credit for your ideas. And I'm also going to share some other things, some other ways you can do that later on. And the other thing I think about is to challenge curiously. So if someone says something, they have some non-inclusive behaviors, perhaps they're ignoring you, perhaps they're, not taking you seriously, perhaps they're speaking over you, just some things that you just think this isn't right. And it might be also, more blatant than that. It might be sort of really direct exclusion that you are experiencing. You can challenge in a curious way. And I use the acronym TED. So TED, tell me, explain, describe. So if someone says, we couldn't possibly do that, that was a silly idea. Okay, explain to me your thinking around that, why you don't think it would work. Okay, so be curious. Someone presents an idea and you think this is not going to fly. Tell me how you've got to this point of thinking. Yeah, or can you describe in a bit more detail your objection to the idea I'm putting forward? So this is a way to engage curiously and not defensively when you want to speak up and when you want to challenge. But if you do it in this curious way using TED, tell me, explain, or describe, you're engaging in challenge in a curious and conversational way, rather than, oh, that's rubbish, or that's useless, or why don't you like my idea, or yeah, you think you're right and I think I'm wrong, because none of that's going to land very well and you're not going to be heard. And also, there's a saying, seek to understand before being understood. So what you're doing is you're saying, I really want to understand where you're coming from, and then I can try and be understood. But I'm trying to understand you first and what's important to you and why this matters or what your objections are. So that can be really helpful. I hope that's given you a bit of food for thought about this, if there are organizational barriers or barriers about who you are, that you think there's bias in the system in some way and things are getting in the way. Hopefully that's helping you to frame and think about that. Now, sometimes communication styles are a barrier, and there are so many ways that we communicate that sometimes doesn't land. Someone says A, I hear Z. It just doesn't land for me because it's not in the way that I expect the communication to be. And so I just wanted to share with you something around this to help you think about what you can do, because I think some people said that they had an introverted preference, or they might be a neurodivergent. And I know there's a huge amount of neurodivergence. So it's hard for me to make sure that we land with everyone. But I think that if that's you, I would say do a bit, the pre-work piece, the preparation is extra important for you. Anticipate what the topics in your meeting are. Ask for agendas in advance, and pre-reads to allow you to have time to process and formulate your thoughts in advance. So this is really important. And I did some work with Amazon. It was quite a few years ago now. But one of the things that they were doing is they were creating thinking time in their meetings. So they'd say, we're going to talk about this topic. Maybe here's some bullet points, or someone does a presentation on it. And then they'd actually say, now we're going to have some silent time so that people can think before they speak, so that you don't just get those people jumping in who always do and not leaving space for anyone. So this might be a suggestion that you put forward into your organization to create some space for everyone to think and formulate their thoughts better. The other thing is to be adaptable. There will be a dominant communication style in any meeting that you're in. It could be sort of rapid fire discussions. And so if it is, you then have to look for opportunities to contribute. But if that's the case, it's rapid fire and everyone speaks over each other and you find it difficult to get in, perhaps you then start adding into the chat, so that you're still getting into the conversation, or you do a follow-up email, at least making sure that you are being heard in some way. So just because you haven't been heard in your meeting doesn't mean that you shouldn't still contribute. You haven't been heard verbally. There's the chat, there's the email afterwards, or there's even, I didn't get to speak, so could I have a conversation with you afterwards? And sometimes, if this is always the way it goes, if you've got a good chairperson, you can go to the chair of the meeting and say, there's point 3 on the agenda. I find it difficult to get into the conversation, and I've got something to say on point 3. At that point, could you bring me into the conversation? So there's nothing wrong with asking for a little bit of support. And really, a good chair should be looking and should be noticing. But I also know that some meetings are a bit of a free for all. So yeah, if you are the leader of the meeting or the chair of the meeting, ask, does anyone who hasn't spoken yet have a perspective? Not just does anyone have a perspective? So giving those quieter voices a chance. And as I said, let's take a moment for reflection can be a really good thing to add. And some of you I know are in middle positions. Think about how you're running and some of you are directors. Think about how you're running your meetings. Think about how you can make them more inclusive for everyone. And educate colleagues about communication differences. Sometimes when I have a new starter, for example, I ask, what's the best way how do I get the best from you? How do you like to be communicated with? What works for you? And I try and adapt, but I also share what works best for me as well. So we can have a really clear understanding. So you can have a reset if you are running a team and say, let's take a reset. How do we like to be communicated with? What is working? What's not working for us? What can we do differently so that everyone is helped? So, for example, some people might want the agenda and want a pre-paper. Some people will rock up in the moment. Some people want to speak and other people want to reflect. How can we make sure this is the most inclusive space so that everyone has a chance? So it's sort of useful to be thinking about everyone, not just the majority group or the dominant group. But if we want to create inclusive spaces, we need to be thinking about how things land with different people, and they will know what lands for them best. So when we're thinking about getting credit and speaking up, this can be a really difficult one to navigate because we're thinking about different personality styles. We're thinking about what's the best way to do this in my organization, because every organization is different and you might be navigating lots of organizational politics. I wanted to share with you the insights framework a little bit briefly, and you might have come across it. So insights is based on the work of Carl Jung, an eminent psychologist. And what it has is these 4 colors that you can see here. Fiery red, which is very direct, quite pacey, very results focused kind of communication, sort of speaking in bullet points and getting things done, not particularly interested in small talk or or thinking about people that much, you know, people and emotions. That's not really what the fiery red communication style is all about. Then there's the sunshine yellow, and sunshine yellow is full of energy and enthusiasm, storytellers, and who have big visions about the future, not so detailed, again, energetic. But this time much more people focused. So it's not about the task, it's about the big picture, and it's about taking people with you. Then there's the earth green, and the earth green is calm, methodical, very interested in people, but more on a one-to-one. Yeah, it's like, let me get to know you. Let me get to know what makes you tick and what's important to you. And let's talk about us first before we move into the detail of the task at hand. They're the people who will remember your children's birthdays or your anniversary of something, because they've taken the time to get to know you. It's really important to them, and they're interested in you, but in much more one-to-one way. And then there's the cool blue. And cool blue can be very focused on getting things right, very precise in their communication style. They want to dot the I's and cross the T's. They want to make sure policies are adhered to. They want to know what best practice is, and they want to do the right thing. And they need time to think about that. Okay, so these are different personalities, preferences. I don't want to put anyone in a box. We are all of these colors, but some will be more dominant than others. Think about it like an iceberg. There's a little bit that shows up, and then there's a lot beneath the surface. So we're kind of thinking about what shows up most so that we can interact with it and adapt. And fiery red and sunshine yellow, I would say, are more extrovert. They're more sort of outgoing in their opinions. And earth green and cool blue are a bit more introverted, more reflective in their approach. That doesn't mean they don't talk to people or get tasks done, but they will be more reflective, whereas the fiery red and the sunshine yellow are much more out there with their opinions. And when we look at earth green and sunshine yellow at the bottom, they are more people focused, and fiery red and cool blue are much more task focused. So think about cool blue for a minute. Think about the cool blue energy that I've mentioned, and think about how you might adapt your style and your approach to communicate with them. How might you come across? What might your pace be? What might your style be? How might you communicate with them? So I'm just giving you a few seconds to think about that. And hopefully you're coming up with some answers there. So let's have a look. What might you do? So you might quieten your body language and slow down your pace, because that's much more in line with the cool blue energy. You might make sure everything is tidy and organized, because the cool blue is very logical, and that's really important to them, for you to see that you are in ordered and methodical in your approach. I've got a coaching client at the moment who's the opposite of these things and has a cool blue line manager, and has really struggled with trying to be credible to them, because for them organization is key, and they're coming, and the person comes over a little bit more scattergun and ideasy, and for them that's not professional. So you might have to quieten yourself down a bit, be a bit more organized, present your ideas with clarity and structure. Maybe send them something in advance to read, so they know what's coming and what you're going to discuss with them, and really have your thoughts organized. So if there's someone who has strong cool blue energy in your life, these are the sorts of ways you might adapt your approach to ensure you are heard by them. If you come in with just, let's brainstorm, and I've got some great ideas, and I want to tell you a story, and you're really fast paced, they're going to switch off to you, and you won't be heard by them. So again, now let's think about the fiery red energy. I said they're direct, they're outgoing with their ideas, they're quite task focused, they're, rapid fire, interested in the task, not necessarily the person. How do you think you might communicate with them? What might your body language be like, your pace, your tone? How might you order the things that you might communicate with them if you want to be heard by them? Hopefully you're thinking of some of the things. So you need to stand tall. They want to see confidence in you. That's what they want to see when you communicate with them. So that power pose could be quite helpful before you communicate with them. And it exudes confidence also. Focus your attention on the task at hand. They don't really want the small talk. They don't want to talk about how your weekend was or anything like that. Get to the point and let them know what you've come to discuss with them. Make sure you're connecting it with objectives and also outputs. So actually, what is the important thing? What are we trying to achieve here? And how is what you're talking about taking them towards what it is you want to achieve? Because if you're not talking about that, what's the point of the conversation in their mind? And also emotions. So detach from emotion. I feel this. This is how the staff are feeling at the moment. They're not that interested, really. If you say staff morale is down at the moment, yeah, so what? How is it impacting outcomes? Staff morale is down. We're losing 2 staff. And that's going to really impact us because it's going to be costly to re-recruit and it's going to put pressure on other colleagues. Yeah. So you'd need to talk about it in those terms rather than just staff morale is down, for them to actually really hear you. So we move to the sunshine yellow energy, the energetic, enthusiastic person, the person who's a storyteller and a visionary, the person who loves being around groups of people. Yeah. So how would you make sure you are heard by them? How do you make sure your message lands with them? Give you 30 seconds to think about that before I reveal it. And just letting you know, I've got 2 screens and my other screen is a bit bigger. So that's why I'm looking to the right sometimes. Okay, so with sunshine yellow energy, you need to smile. You need to invite connection. They want enthusiasm. They want energy. They don't want an energy drainer who comes to them miserable. So that idea of bringing solutions and bringing ideas to the table is the sort of thing that they want. Ask open questions. They like that. They like curiosity. Yeah, you don't have to come with all the answers to them. But you could come with, we could do this, we could do that, and we can think about it and we can talk about it. So that's something that they really enjoy. They also like to think out of the box. So what else might be possible? What else could we do? What else could we try? They love new ideas and ways of doing things. And as I've said, be expressive, be enthusiastic. It will really land with them. Now, you might notice that they're kind of opposite to the cool blue energy. And so they kind of have to meet in the middle somewhere. If you find that someone you want to be heard with is opposite to you, you won't necessarily be able to go directly to their behavior because it will be really unnatural for you. So for example, if you're sunshine yellow and you want to communicate with the cool blue, you might either go into fiery red energy or you might go into the earth green energy because that's closer to you without having to be exactly like them, and it's more likely to you're more likely to be heard by them. So earth green, as I talked about, quite methodical, likes one-to-one conversations, interested in people and emotion, and getting to know you. So they want something quite informal, really. They want you to be calm as well, like the cool blue energy, but it's a different kind of calmness. It's not the sort of calm and methodical and organized, but just let's be calm, let's be relaxed, let's be informal, let's have a conversation. They want you to listen. They want you to listen to what they have to say and really show that you're listening and that you're interested in them. Yeah, again, as I said, it's about being relaxed and calm with them. Your PQ reps will really help. Your calm breathing will really help. Imagining yourself on the beach will really help. They want you to be in that calm and a lovely space. And also values. They want to know why. Why should I do this? Why is it that you're bringing this to me? Go back to why things are important. They're very interested in that. So look at these ways of adapting your communication. Think about maybe think about when you're not being heard at the moment. Is it with someone who has an opposite communication preference to you? Observe the colors either side of them and think about which one's more natural for you to go into, and look at some of those behaviors and think about dialing some of those up so you can be heard in conversation with them. Gosh, I'm looking at the time. It's going really quickly. I think I've taken an hour. So I'm going to really quickly just move on to the last few slides. So another thing that often happens is that people feel that their ideas are not, they're heard, but they're quickly moved on from. And so a tool I use is called PEP. You make your point, you explain 3 reasons why that point is a good one, and you make your point again. Okay, so why that's good is because you're making a point at the end, and so someone else can't take credit for it. Okay, because you made it at the beginning and the end. And also, why 3 is powerful is that 3 is really memorable, but it also gives weight. If I've got 3 reasons why you should buy a Mini, I've really thought about it. If I've got 20, I lose you. If I've only got 1, you can easily say, no, I think you should buy a Volkswagen instead. Yeah. So you make your point. I think everyone should buy Minis. 3 reasons why. They don't take up too much space. They're nippy, and they've got a lovely shape. I think everyone should buy a Mini. So this is a really good tool to have in your toolkit to ensure that your messages land, and you can even prepare them before the meeting. You can say, what's my point? What's 3 reasons why it's a good point? And make my point again. Now, don't worry about the fact that you're not able to elaborate on your point, because if they're interested, they will ask you more. They will say, oh, tell me about point 2 a little bit more, or tell me a little bit more about what you think about this. So don't worry about giving everything straight away, because if you give too much, it can become, people lose you. They say that we don't have such a good concentration span anymore, thanks to the internet, thanks to all the information that's coming at us. So it can be really helpful not to overspeak, to keep it succinct, but give them the opportunity then to ask more questions. And another tool for you is what I call assertive language. And these slides will be shared because I know I'm sharing an awful lot with you. And so sometimes our language isn't assertive enough and it's hard to get into the conversation. And so typically the things we might say in a very inclusive environment where everyone's heard are things like, how about we do this? Or I tend to agree. Or I think maybe we should. Or I agree. Or maybe we can try this. Or, well, what if we thought about it this way? And that's fine in a great situation. But if you find you're not being heard, you might find you need to be more assertive. And this comes from some research done. It's in the Harvard Business Review, and it's specifically about women finding their voice by Heath Flynn and Davis Holt. However, what I'd say is I think it works for everyone, especially if you feel you're not being heard. So you can say things like, I strongly suggest. That's absolutely right. And here's why I think that's right. My strong advice to you would be to do this. Or I completely agree. And this is the reason why. Or here's my plan. Or I recommend we do this. Can you hear the difference in the language? Well, what if? I recommend. It's much more assertive, and that language can help you be heard. You have to understand the context you're in. I think that's very important. Assertive language doesn't always work for you. So you've got to think, is this going to work for me? In which situations would I need to use this? But when you do, it does work effectively. And I personally put PEP, that tool I just shared with you, and this assertive language in the back of my notebook to remind myself to use it at times. So I'm going to just share two things before I go to questions, because I do want you to have enough time for questions. The first is about voice. Yeah. As I've said, breathe deeply to control those nerves and really have that power in your voice. And breathe from your stomach, your diaphragm they talk about. But really, when you breathe in, your stomach should be expanding. So that's when you know you're breathing deeply. Those of you who swim will understand the diaphragmatic, if I could speak, breathing. So try and breathe from that deep place. It gives you a better quality of voice and means that you're better able to project. Slow down and don't be afraid to pause. That can be really helpful. Make a point, just take a breath and then make another point. It can really help you emphasize what you're saying. Sometimes we rush and people don't catch what we're saying, but actually slowing down, being deliberate about when you pause, that can have mean that you're heard in a more effective way. You might also want to vary your pitch. So you might actually want to deepen your voice at times to show that this is really important. I want to really engage with you, and I want to highlight the point that you can deepen your voice. Or you might want to raise your voice, and it might be about making it more light. And we're going to talk about the Christmas party, and that's lots of fun. So play with the varying of pitch of your voice. It helps people not to get bored with what you're saying, and really helps them hear you and listen well. So vary the tone, vary the pitch. If your accent is different to the majority of people in your workplace, you might want to slow it down a little bit just to enable people to tune into your accent also. So that can be something that you might consider doing, and really project. If you're in a room, a boardroom, for example, always be talking to the person as far away as possible, because if they can hear you, everyone else can. Too often we're just talking to the people either side of us, and that means the people at the end don't hear. And once they don't hear, what they do is they switch off. And focus on crisp articulation. So trying not to have too many ums and ahs, or you knows. I've noticed that a lot. And just try and be clear as you possibly can with your speech so that everyone hears what you're saying. And you might want to warm up your voice. I had the pleasure of interviewing Lenny Henry last year, and he taught me lots of different vocal exercises. He does lots before he speaks, from that sort of moving your lips and playing with your lips to doing scales and to saying Peter Piper picks a peck of pickled peppers. So those sorts of things can really help you also. So think about your voice, play with your voice. It's another tool in being heard. And lastly, just some thoughts about things that you can do. Maybe you don't have a big speech in the meeting, but micro contributions, a clarifying question, a supportive comment. These are just ways you can start getting your voice into the room. Build a brag file. Get this file on your computer, maybe on a spreadsheet, or maybe in the notes on your phone, or maybe in your pad, and think about the impactful contributions that you have made. Because the more you realize that you're able to do it, the more you will do it. So note it. I was able to ask a question today. I was able to make a point that everyone picked up on. So start noting that spreadsheet, noting them in the spreadsheet, in the notebook, in your notes on your phone, and keep going back to them. It's really going to boost your confidence and help you realize that you can contribute. You might also think about where you sit in a meeting. So there'll be a chair or a most senior person who you need to catch the eye of to speak. If they can't see you, they're never going to invite you to speak. You might want to sit opposite them or beside them. And then it's much easier for you to indicate to them that you want to contribute. I mean, this only works in person, and I know we have a lot of online meetings. It's harder then. There is a hand up function, though, in most meetings, and maybe asking everyone to use the function rather than just diving in can make it a bit fairer. You can also connect to other people's points. So, for example, you might say, oh, X said that. I want to build on their point. Or actually, that was a great point that they made. I really think that's really good. Can we spend some time on it? So you don't have to have the unique idea and the most important point. You can be collaborative and build on what's there while also giving the other person credit. And stories often humanize a message. What stories do you have? Customer stories, colleague stories that can bring your points to life. So, people often say, fake it, don't they? And they say, fake it until you make it. But I say, sometimes we have to fake it until we become it. So you might not be the most vocal person, or you might not always be heard. But actually, if you start acting like someone who is heard, who is listened to, you will become that person. Thank you so much. I know I've gone through an awful lot in this session. I'd love to ask you, what's one small step you can take to be heard at work? And maybe you can put that in the chat. It would be great to know.
Jenny, that was fantastic.
Thank you.
I think we've all been listening intently to what you've had to say. It's absolutely awesome. I think what you've demonstrated is that these are life skills, lifelong learning.
Yes.
That we never should stop learning these skills and honing in on these skills. I think the other thing as well is you very much highlighted the fact that we all have to be very much aware and adapt to situations. And it's very much about reading the room, isn't it? As well as how we portray and are perceived. It's about how others come across in those situations as well. Wow, so much. So we move on to some questions. Okay. So somebody's asked, is it true that the less you say, the louder you are heard?
Oh,
interesting
nice
question.
That's a lovely point, and it can be. There's a really great book called Quiet by Susan Cain. And she really talks about the power of being an introvert and how actually you can be that person who didn't speak all meeting, but at the end drops that nugget or sort of just says, synthesizes everything and says, you know what we've been talking about today, it's this. So it can really work for you. I think sometimes it depends on your level of confidence and your seniority as well. I think there's more than one factor in there. If you're going to every meeting and you never speak, that's not necessarily going to enhance your career. But if you are able to really add those nuggets of wisdom at the right time, absolutely that can be the case. And there are people who are just talking, they're not listening, they're thinking aloud and just speaking for the sake of it and having nothing really to say can be detrimental. So I agree, just speaking for the sake of it, you've got nothing to say, you're just repeating other people's points, you're not bringing anything new to the conversation, doesn't add. So that can be detrimental. So I guess my answer is it depends. Yeah.
Yeah, and less can be more, can't it? Was it quality versus quantity?
Absolutely.
Definitely. And it kind of feeds into what you were saying earlier as well about, if you could just elaborate a little bit more about the whole extrovert bias and how we can kind of challenge or overcome that in those spaces.
Yeah, it's hard work. Absolutely. I think that, those people who just big themselves up in a meeting, and you're thinking, gosh, I've done all that, but I'm not saying anything about it, is really tough. I think we do have a responsibility to perhaps bring it up to someone. If you're seeing that happening in your organization, I would definitely bring it up to people who chair meetings or a line manager and just say, yeah, there seems to be loudest voice gets heard, and there are so many different styles, and doesn't mean people don't have something really valuable to contribute. What could we do as a team to make sure everyone's voice is heard? So bring it up to a line manager, if you're managing it, talking about it to others, and just showing that everyone's contribution is valuable, and always thinking about that. What's the way we can contribute, even if it isn't speaking? Is it the chat? Is it an email later? Is it a one-to-one conversation? So thinking about that. But there does seem to be in society a bit of a bias for people who talk, and it doesn't mean they have more to say or contribute. So we do need to make space.
So right. And again, what you were saying earlier about Amazon implementing thinking time.
Yes.
It's okay to kind of implement a new structure, a new shape. It's okay to do that.
Most
and it
definitely.
may evoke other people to be heard as well. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Another question here. So it says, does a person's voice tone matter during a presentation or a meeting to be heard and gain attention? So basically, does their voice tone matter in those scenarios?
Yeah, I just want to bring another point to the table as well about organization success, and that we know that when you harness the ideas of every person, that organizations do better. And actually, the McKinsey research says 35% improvement on the bottom line when diversity is harnessed. And so, really, if you're not getting the voices of people who might be introverted or have any other background, you're missing out. And in the society we live in today, which is so competitive, it's a real mistake. So it's really important.
But you are so right, Jenny. I think there's so much to say on that, isn't there? Because obviously, even in my role, it's very much about supporting people to get to interview. And it's the same kind of formula, what you're saying about the cool, the fiery, the earth, the sunshine. It's about understanding who's going to interview you, or when you're in that role of position, who are the key players in that group. And it doesn't stop, does it? You have to keep being aware of the different energy and vibrations around you consistently in order to understand how you can actually change the tonation of your own vibration as well. There's so much to learn, absolutely so much. So I'll repeat that question. So it's basically, it's okay. So basically the question was, so does a person's tone matter?
Oh yes, tone.
When they're presenting or in a meeting or something like that to gain attention?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. What I would say is you want to be authentically you. So you don't want to try and be someone else and have a totally different voice, but I would play with it. And what I would say is there are people, if you remember, we had a prime minister called Margaret Thatcher. She really changed. She had elocution lessons to deepen her voice so men would take her seriously. And a lot of women in senior roles have done that, because the higher pitched, quite often people say, is not so listened to and is not so heard. And there's lots of research about that. But you can play with pitch is what I would say. And so you might just lower your voice to the most comfortable level because it gives you more authority. But you also might play with the ups and downs of your voice to intonate and make things more interesting. One of the things that goes against women, and I don't know who the person is who's asked this question, is there's this Americanism that a lot of people do, which is, my name is Jenny, and they kind of end their sentences in a higher pitch, which almost sounds like a question.
Interesting.
That if it feels like you're making a statement but it sounds like a question, people start to question you. So there's a lot to think about with your voice, and I would play with it. I would, if you're practicing a presentation particularly, I would play with increasing your tone at some point, lowering your tone at another, having some strategic pauses, and just notice. And it might make it more interesting for you as well if you're changing your voice a little bit as you deliver the presentation. So I play with it is what I would say.
And smile sometimes.
Yes, absolutely.
It automatically changes the tonation, doesn't it?
Yeah, really good point.
Okay. Next question here. It says, can you repeat the name of the book, please? I think there was it to do with breathing exercises?
Okay, yes,
Um,
it's Positive Intelligence, Dr. Shazad Charmaine. So first name Shirzad, and surname I believe is spelled Chamine. If you put those letters in, it will come up. But it's called Positive Intelligence. And that was
great.
particularly around those PQ reps that I was mentioning, that idea of putting your fingers together.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jenny. Okay, it's in the chat box now as well. Thanks, Hayden. Okay, so in case of someone having a rapid fire communication style, so I'm taking it, it's the fiery ones that are in at
Yes,
play here,
yes,
where you
yeah.
can't get a word in, basically. Is it
Mm.
okay to take space for yourself by speaking while they're still talking?
Right. Really challenging, isn't it? And it depends on who they are, because if they're
Yes.
quite senior to you and you start doing that, they might take offense, mightn't they?
Mm,
So it's a really difficult one. I think that, yeah, it's a really difficult one. Speaking over people can work for you, but it can also cause offense. I might, if it's one on one, I probably will wait till they're finished and just say, I'd like to share my thoughts now. If it's in a meeting setting, then they're maybe speaking over everyone. And perhaps there's something that can be done with someone who's managing the meeting to say afterwards, oh, it's really hard because of how they communicate. However, they might be the most senior person in the room again, so it's really difficult. You could say, I think another thing to do might be to send an email afterwards and say, I did have some points I wanted to make, but I wasn't able to in the meeting. I'd like to share these with you now, because that might help them realize that they're not giving other people a chance to
it's a very
speak.
good idea, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, speaking over is a difficult one, and sometimes people do take offense. Yeah.
Used to hearing your voice as
Mm,
well. If you're
mm,
not known to be a key player per
yes,
se, then all
yes.
of a sudden they almost don't expect that side of the room to make a noise.
No, that's
So
very
it
true.
almost surprises them if you do
Mm,
kind of try to intervene or interject.
yeah,
But like you said, context is key, isn't it?
yeah, it is.
It really
It
just
is.
depends. Okay. So another question. Have you noticed any generational or cultural divides? And what is your advice for this? How about divides between men and women?
Oh, there's so many divides. I can tell you, in the last month, I was speaking to my daughter this morning, who's generations, Gen Z, and I
We
just
love Gen Z.
yeah, I've had so many people say we cannot communicate with Gen Zs. They have different values, morals, communication style, blah blah blah.
Yes.
But I also say, when I was talking to my daughter about it, I was saying, and the other way around, because I wonder how tolerant Gen Zs are of the older generation and how they communicate and their expectations. And this intergenerational workplace is bringing a lot of miscommunication.
Mhm.
I notice it as well, but I've been speaking to a lot of people about it. I really think that there's a lot of work to do to try and understand each other better and not misunderstand each other. So, when someone's giving someone feedback, I've noticed with some, and I don't want to generalize, everyone is different, but people can take it really personally. I've noticed more from the younger generation, and what people are trying to do is trying to help them be better. It's more positive, feedback and constructive feedback rather than that. So I think there's a bit of explaining intentions before communication that has to happen more, which is, I'm going to say this to you, my intention is for your good, or my intention is to help, or my intention is to give you an
This
idea
is
so
coming
that
from
you
a
don't
good
make a
place.
mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think on both sides, whichever generation you're coming from, you might have to explain more the intention for your communication before you communicate. I think that enables you to be heard more. I think that's really
No,
important.
I think I totally agree with you on that. Irrespective of generationally or culturally, I think
Yes.
you're absolutely spot on with that. It's almost like you have to give a heads up.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
it's almost like a hashtag disclaimer.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally get that. It's a bit like when I'm proofreading a CV that's
Yes.
not very good. I'll say, look, by the way, just
Yes.
before I go in, I'm just going to explain that you are amazing and this is not a
Yes.
criticism of you personally, but however, you have to
Yeah.
almost launch
Yeah.
in. And I
Absolutely.
think
Yeah.
you're so right on that.
Yeah.
And also, what would you say also in terms of culturally as well, but also in terms of hybrid working, how that's affected communication?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that, yeah, I think that I think we all started getting to shorthand communication, and now
Yep.
a lot of people are using AI, and now we're getting some immaculate emails, aren't we? It's just like, oh my God, this is an essay. I only asked a little question, and I think that I actually think that AI is helping, because I think that some of the way we were communicating was leading to a lot of misinterpretation, maybe offense taken, etc. And I think because people are using AI to craft it, AI is much more polite and wants to please. And
Yes.
so actually what we're getting is some improved communication on that front, as a result, if
A little bit
people
more
do use it.
polished.
Yes, exactly. And a bit more, yeah, how are you, before you launch into this long email.
Again, on the whole hybrid working, I don't know about you, but even myself, it's like with all since the pandemic, when I'm on site at a meeting, it's almost like I have to reprogram my brain
Yes,
about
yeah,
eye contact and talking.
yes,
And we've all forgotten that. We're not on
exactly.
site in
No more
offices
expertise.
Monday to Friday anymore.
No, no, absolutely. I think so. And I have noticed a real desire for people to be together more. Uh,
Yes.
but you're right. Yeah, there's so much, you turn on a screen, you're on the screen, but we can turn off the screen and just be different. And now it's like, oh
Yes.
gosh,
Yes.
actually, someone is seeing me the whole time.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
yeah.
And
So,
then after this session, you're then talking to your Gen Z daughter, like
yes,
literally seconds later,
yes,
and you're code
exactly.
switching every
Yes.
minute.
Yeah,
So it's
completely.
fascinating.
Yeah, I was going
Okay,
to just
another.
slip into.
Sorry, go on.
I know you've got more questions, but I want to slip in two things.
Yeah,
For Gen Zs, hashtag no offense before saying it won't do it. So when I said, share your intention, it's not like just saying no offense. That doesn't do it. You do have to actually really think about what you're trying to say and how the person might receive it in a little bit of a deeper way, and think about, yeah, I'm speaking to someone who could be a parent or
that's
whoever,
right.
and how would I speak to them? So you do need to adapt. And when it comes to men and women, it's a big thing, actually. It's a really big
Mm,
thing in terms of communication, because women cannot just take on the communication approach of men. They get called alpha females or aggressive or
mm,
assertive,
yes.
not assertive, not in a positive way. And so it can be really challenging to kind of find your place of communication, particularly if perhaps you're in a male dominated environment, for example, because we are expected to be supportive, compassionate. These
Mm.
things are overlaid on us. That pep tool that I gave really helps women in male
Mm.
dominated environments. Make
So,
your
Jenny, you're a
point, explain
successful
3 times.
businesswoman. How have you navigated that?
Yeah, I mean, the tools I share with you are tools I use myself. Yeah, I
Okay.
think, they're the things I use myself. I try and be quite concise and logical in male dominated environments. I try and make sure, the whole color wheel. If I don't know people that well, I try to do all of them. So I'll think, oh, I'll send them something in advance. I'll be bullet pointy with them, but I'll also give them some ideas and thoughts, and I'll also see if they're interested in actually being personable. So
Wow.
I try and hit all the spots, and then the longer you know someone, the longer you realize the area that they're most interested in being like. But I think that's what, if I don't know someone, I'll try and hit the areas to see, yeah, what happens most for them.
Cover all corners, actually. That
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
does make sense. If in doubt,
Yes,
that way you can't
exactly.
go wrong. You've covered all corners. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Another question here. Does how you dress affect whether you are heard?
Ah, that's such a good question. I think it's a good question. People judge, there's something called the McGurk effect. Do Google it. It's McGurk. And it's not about a, a, a dress per se, but what it shows is this person says bar, 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 and then he changes his mouth to f, and he's saying bar still, but he's going f, and people hear far. You actually hear what you see rather than what you actually hear. And it's called the McGurk effect. And there is something about the fact that people are not just listening, they are making judgments with their eyes and interpreting you. And so I don't know, I'm not going to say, we're not in the 80s where your shoulder pads or, it's not about that. But I think you should feel confident in what you're wearing and think about the environment that you are stepping into. I think that's important. I do talks for different places, and some places it's more the uniform to wear some trainers with whatever you're wearing. So I'll wear the
Mhm.
trainers, and in others it's more about me putting on a pair of heels. And so I think it's about knowing who you're talking to. Again, like that the prep element I was saying, think about who you're talking to, who's your audience, what would
Mm.
they expect, but also what is your brand. So, if you're a business owner, you might have a brand. It doesn't matter which environment you're in, this is you. And so I think there are things to consider. What's your brand? What's the environment? What's the situation? But I think what you wear matters. And I think why it matters most to me is because when I feel good in what I'm wearing, I'm more confident. And I think that's the key. What feel confident in what you're wearing, that will ooze outward.
Totally agree with you. Totally. Okay. So in a meeting or a presentation, I believe the way people perceive someone's job, even when their experience justifies their contribution, can affect whether someone is actually heard. So it's perception they're talking about. So
Mm.
how can you bring credibility to your communication?
So that was about someone perhaps saying you're not that senior here, or your job's not as important as my job, I don't have to listen. I think I'm taking that as the point. And I think you're absolutely right. There can be quite a hierarchy. If we think about education establishments, that it's quite hierarchical normally. And so actually, the person whose voice is listened to most is the most senior person. And if you're perhaps seen as in a less senior position, sometimes you don't get listened to and have the same weight. And I think that's a really good point you made. I go back to a couple of things. The first is allies. If you feel you're not being listened to, is there someone more senior who can be your ally, who can back you up, who can say, oh, I want to stay on the point that that person made because it was interesting or valuable, or I think that person has something to contribute. So I think there's something about allies that is really helpful. The other thing that you can do is you can influence before you get in the room. So you might
Mm.
say, actually, there's a point I want to make. And probably the first time, it shouldn't be the first time people hear it when they're in the room. So you might actually talk to a few people and say, this is a really important thing. What do you think about it? By the time you mention it in the room, people are like, oh, yeah, I've heard about that. The idea's been socialized to me. Let's pick up on it. So do a bit of, if that's possible and if that's feasible for you, talk to people about it before you mention it in the meeting, because they're more
Mm.
likely to hear it and listen to it and be interested in it. Or this other idea of having allies in the room as well. And just another thought on that. How important is it? Is it about the idea or is it about the idea coming from you? So sometimes it's about the idea coming from you because it's you want your career to move forward, but sometimes
Yeah.
it's just about the idea. And if it's just about the idea, sometimes you might have to mention it to someone more senior for them to mention it in the meeting. So that's just another thought on that.
Yes. No, I understand and agree with what you've just said there. It's about sometimes utilizing their hierarchical position in that scenario to help you actually, and that actually makes them an instant ally, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say thank you so much today. That's all we've got time for in this What It Takes to Be Heard at Work. Thank you so much, Jenny, for your insights and your expertise and sharing your time with us this evening. There's a short evaluation survey in the chat box before we go, and this recording will be made available very soon. I think I'm also supposed to tell you again that the next event is on the 7th of August. I do believe you will be getting information on that. And that one is called What It Takes to Avoid Burnout, Sustainable Energy for Work and Life. And it's online, just like this one. And it's on the 7th of August. So I just had to let you know about that one. So please book for that session. And just one final word from Jenny. Any top tips or final words from you before we close for today?
I would say fortune favors the brave. And I think that be brave, whether sharing your ideas, telling someone what the barriers are to you sharing your ideas. You have something to contribute. You deserve to be heard. And so I believe you'll be able to find a way to do it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jenny.
Great to see everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.